Thank you for tuning in to the Natty News Daily podcast. This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Core Nutritionals. You can check out corenutritionals.com for all your supplement needs and use code Natty News Daily at checkout to save 20%. Enjoy the episode.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. Dan and I are joined by Peter Herguth. We talked about this before. I was going to butcher it. Peter Herguth.
You had the training, James.
Man,
You've already lost the plot. All right.
Worked out fine.
Peter, welcome.
Do we want to roll with it? Are we running with it?
Yeah, we're running with it.
Yeah, it's fine with me. What's
we
up,
don't
guys?
edit anything here.
We have fun here.
Yeah, so that's out of the way now, right? So we can just talk about anything. So we've got Peter on board today. Peter is a unique individual in as such that he is a strongman competitor, and more than just a strongman competitor, a very well-established record holder, competed Arnold Amateur, correct?
Yep.
Right? Okay. So like high level, right? Not your backyard brawl type environment here. And is a pro natural bodybuilder as well, just competed at the Mr. America. So we want to dive into both aspects of that, kind of get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to turn the mic right over to you. Let's hear a little bit about, how you got into the physique sports and the strength sports.
Let's see. In college, I basically just wanted to get in shape. I've been, at least in high school, I was basically just kind of a computer guy. Sat down, played a lot of World of Warcraft through college. But yeah, like freshman year, I basically just played video games through freshman year. So my parents took me back to home, and they have a basement gym, and a buddy of mine and I just kind of were working out a little bit, and kind of just having someone with me to lift, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty great. I like this, but I hate team sports. So maybe there's an aspect of exercise that I don't hate. And I kind of got into that. Things kind of moved forward a little bit. Just kind of like lifting for aesthetics for the most part, just generally. I was at a 24-hour fitness, waiting on a squat rack, and there was a dude in there just doing rack pulls for like 15 minutes. I was like, whatever, I'll just work in with this dude. I was going to do squats, but whatever, I'll just do some rack pulls with this guy. And he was like double overhanding, like 585 for sets of like 10. I was like, whatever, I'll throw on some straps, do something with him. And he, we ended up chatting, talking. He's like, hey, I do strongman. Do you want to like come to my place and carry kegs and lift a log or something like that? Which doesn't sound like something you would normally take someone up on. But
Yeah.
like, I knew I didn't want to power lift. Like power lift, like I like squatting, benching, and deadlift, but as a competitive venue, or direction, it wasn't really what I wanted. But I'd heard of strongman kind of vaguely, from like TV. Some people have seen that, but I was like, I mean, I'll give it a go. It sounds kind of varied. But after kind of going to his yard and doing like some keg bear hugs, he had a log, and some axle presses, stuff like that, and some carries. We went over to another dude's place that he knew, which is a Scottish guy that also does Highland Games. And he had a huge home gym, which for me, this was I guess about 8-9 years ago at this point. And he had basically he had a squat rack in his garage, but the ceiling was cut out to fit the squat rack. And then it was just a bunch of like Highland Games and strongman equipment. And that's like basically the old time strongman is in someone's backyard training with whatever implements they have. And I really just kind of fell in love with the sport there.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a unique sport, right? I feel like every time I watch an event or a competition, there's new things that I've never seen before. Like obviously I've seen, a log press, you've seen like the carries and stuff like that, but like throwing kegs over the bar and, picking up, I don't know what they did, like carrying the yoke around like the wheel or whatever, it's just so unique.
Conan's wheel.
Yeah, like deadlifting cars and stuff like that. It's really just like some big meathead sitting back going like, all right, what crazy thing can we do now? Like, oh, let's go pull a truck. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's the ultimate test of, I don't know, true strength to me, right? Because it's not just moving A to B, it's very dynamic.
Yeah, it also means people really know you're good at moving them. Like, if they need someone to help them move, they know you eat the weird stuff.
Yeah, you're used to picking up anything for sure.
Yeah, but no, the like the varied implements is one of the things that really drew me to the sport. Like natural stones, Atlas stones themselves are just awesome. Yeah, the Conan wheel that you described is one of my favorite events. It's just so brutal. It sits in a weird place, and it's just a weird strength endurance exercise, which is a bunch of fun. Bittersweet sort of fun.
Mhm.
Yeah. One of the cool things about strongman stuff is it's actually growing quite a bit of popularity in a lighter form in CrossFit, which is giving it kind of like a lot of like popularity for the lighter weight classes as well. Because
Mhm.
a lot of people don't know strongman has weight classes. They kind of picture Thor or Eddie Hall or Brian Shaw, and they're like, well, I'm not a 400-pound, 7-foot tall dude, so I guess I'm not going to try the sport. But there's weight classes. Well, I mean, so you guys know that I compete in bodybuilding right now at about 135, with
Mhm.
lows at about 133 for depletion. I compete at 175 for strongman. So I go all the way up.
Mhm.
I don't always weigh all the way up to 175. Sometimes I compete at like 160. But there's the power or the weightlifting or the weight classes are very similar to powerlifting.
Mhm.
So you've got weight classes all the way down to about the lowest possible one is 148, but that's kind of a graveyard of a weight class. It's
Mhm.
pretty populated as low as about 165, and that's where it tends to bottom out.
Okay. So I mean, you're putting on a good 40 pounds above your competition weight, which is I would expect, right? Because I mean that's a brutal sport. You would need some weight on you. Have you considered
Mhm.
dropping like another weight class below, or do you feel like that 175 is the sweet spot for you?
I competed in 2021 in the 150 class. I got wind from one of the national reps that class was about to die. They were about to retire it because there's not enough population for it. So I made the cut from 185 or from about 175 to that class to compete in it right before they got rid of it. But yeah, there's just not enough population in the sport, kind of like when you go to a show and it's like you and like two other dudes.
Hmm.
It was a lot like that in the lower weight classes, so there's just wasn't enough competition. That's why I
Gotcha.
generally compete higher, and the Arnold is only 175. That's the lowest it gets, so that was why I was competing at that weight as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure you feel significantly stronger there than what you do in the 150s, right? Just a lot better for leverages.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever I think about my like strongman weight, I think of the Baratheon gods. I was strongman quote from Game of Thrones, if either of you are familiar with that. But yeah, 185, my pressing strength was through the roof. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
when I was at my peak strongman, the high weight was a lot of performance. I didn't feel great, but I performed well.
Okay. Yeah. So that seems to be like a big passion of yours, right? So where you started out with physique, you transitioned to strongman, where did the competitive aspect of bodybuilding come into play?
So in 2019, I was turning 30. And I've kind of always played with the idea of bodybuilding, at least in a competitive way, like hitting the stage. But the barrier of being on stage with massive amounts of stage fright kind of made me never really think about it.
Hmm.
And then I was kind of thinking, well, I want to know how much muscle I put on these 8 years of strongman. And I realized that I've been competing in front of crowds at this point for several years, and I didn't even think about it anymore. So I thought, oh, well, I guess I'll give this a go. I'll finally kind of take the plunge at 30, see how I do. And at that point, I just picked a show that was relatively local, Moorhead City ANBF show. Um, Basically, the same show I just did this last weekend, but several years before. And I just started dieting down and grossly underestimated how quickly I needed to go to make that date. But I got reasonably lean for that contest. And when I got on stage, did the comparisons, did my posing routine, and we did the most muscular pose. I heard the crowd like actually like breathe in collectively. I knew, oh shit, this is another sport I'm sticking with, because just hearing the crowd reaction to like sort of posing and just like seeing the work you've done, I was like, oh yeah, this is a sport I can continue with.
Mhm. Yeah, it is a unique sport in that you don't really see your success more than, once a year, once every 2 years, or even more, right? Where a lot of, competitive athletics, you can see your log press go up, you can see your deadlift go up.
Mhm.
In team sports, you score, you don't score, you get faster, slower, all that. So yeah, it is very interesting, right? We assume that we're making progress in these 2, 3 year off seasons, but you definitely can't tell when you're 40 pounds over stage weight.
Yeah, and I was 185 at my peak for strongman. I guess what felt like strongest, not necessarily my most competitive. And I was like, man, I'm gonna cut down to 160 and be absolutely shredded. And then I hit 160. I was like, oh geez, man, maybe I'm
Yeah,
going a little bit further. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
my first season I got down to 145. So
Okay.
I'm now 10 pounds lower than that from that first season.
Yeah. And you're, correct me if I'm wrong, coached by Cliff, right? Cliff Wilson?
Yep, I work
Yeah.
with Cliff.
Yeah. So
First season
notorious
was
for getting
self-coached.
people. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So notorious for getting people lean, right? So you're at that weight for a reason, not
Yeah,
overly dieted, right?
yeah, and I specifically chose Cliff for that reason. Or that's kind of why I reached out, because I'm like, I'm not going to be the biggest guy, but I feel like with the various things about my body and kind of how I respond to dieting, that I can get. I had a feeling I could get very quite shredded, or at least very very lean, and I think I just wanted his approach to kind of take me there,
Hmm.
and I'm glad I did, because that was kind of the right choice.
And
Absolutely.
what gave
Yeah.
you that sense?
Um, I in my first season, I absorbed um, every podcast I could find that had any interview with any expert whatsoever.
Hmm.
So I think I listened to the entire backlog of Revive Stronger, um, the 3DMJ podcast. Um, I think, well, like half of Sigma Nutrition, because that's a deep backlog there. But basically, I have a long commute, and I was also a delivery driver, so I had hours and hours. And all of the interviews that I heard, I jived most with basically the discussions that Cliff had with various podcast hosts, and it's just kind of the art of that I really enjoyed, and so I just figured I'd reach out, and he had a
Yeah.
space, so I jumped on it.
So when did you start working with him? Did you start working on, because you did a 2019 season, correct? And then this year 2022,
Yes.
that your two seasons. When did you
Uh,
pick up with
I
Cliff?
I reached out just about when I realized that I could do Mr. America. Mostly because I also found out while listening to, maybe it was your podcast, maybe it was the longevity podcast interview with Brett, that he was going to be at Mr. America,
Mhm.
and I was like, all right, I don't want to make any mistakes in being as shredded as I possibly can for that show, because that was basically where I just knew I needed to be not making any mistakes. And I think that was about June. So June or May or June is when I reached out.
Of
Okay.
2022.
Yes, of this year.
Okay, so had you started prepping at that point at all, or no, you
I
started
did
right?
I did a sort of like pre-diet, just sort of like an
Okay.
intuitive, cut some calories down, eating a little bit less. The process I'm familiar with from like 12 years of being in
Yeah, yeah.
strongman.
Hmm.
But yeah, and, from about March 15th, I started cutting down a little bit from
Okay.
168, which is what I actually weighed at Arnold.
Okay.
Hmm.
So still a significant, relatively significant drop in that amount of time. So that's, I mean, credit to your experience and obviously his coaching, right? I don't think anyone's going to doubt Cliff as a coach and his ability to get people lean in time.
Not at
Um,
all.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the season. Let's do a quick recap for those that haven't been following you or don't know. Obviously, we saw you at
Hmm.
Mr. America, but there was one show or more before that.
There was one show before
Mhm.
that. It was October 1st. It was the INBF North
That's
Carolina
right.
PC, and that was It was a fairly small show, but I did get my. There was 8 men in that, so I was able to get my WNBF pro card at that one by winning the overall, which was pretty sick. That was a really fun show. I attended that one in 2021 to kind of scope it out. I was like, cool, I'm going to do this show next year, and it's going to be probably the start of my season, just so that way my plan goes accordingly. And then Mr. America will be next, just because it's a big pro show, can get used to that big ass stage. And that was awesome. Mr. America was sick. So that was the second show.
Yes, it was.
And then, yeah, I did 3 shows in 3 weeks. And then last week was the ANBF Armed Forces Pro Nationals, which was quite fun as well. And one of the cool things about that show is I got to compete with, as a pro, the other person I competed with for my first show in 2019. So he was there. We got to like shake hands, compete again, and
Full circle.
it was awesome. Yeah,
That's
it really
very
was.
cool.
And that was a good one. So what was that?
Yeah. How was it being up on stage with all those incredible athletes in Mr. America? I mean, we were sitting there at the booth, like that was just insane to watch in person, but to be up there, I mean, that's different.
It was wild. There are so many legends because I traveled to the Yorton just to watch it because it's in Charlotte. So I got to see Levi for the first time there. And then I was sitting backstage, just kind of pacing the hallway like I do. And Levi walks by. I'm like, holy shit, that dude is huge in person. Because he's just like, he's about the same height, but we are just totally different people. I actually didn't see Mishak at all because we were in totally different parts until we were walking up to the stage, and I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And then Ken Beerley was backstage just by me, and it was just so cool to be able to be on stage with basically so many legends or people I've seen, YouTube videos with, interviews with you all. It was just unreal.
Yeah.
I just wish I could have been on the stage with the heavyweights too, or the tall.
Yeah. I mean, it was champions of champions, right? All different generations, different, legends within their own rights. I mean, it was awesome to see. So yeah, I can't imagine what you were feeling kind of posing down with some of those people up there.
Yeah. And then Dan, that was your pro debut last year, right?
It was, yes.
Yep. It was also my pro debut. So I got to do the same thing.
It's a good one to start with.
Yeah.
Might have to add it to my list. We'll see. I don't know if I
It's
want
worth
to do
doing.
that to myself. Well, we were talking in a podcast that actually hasn't aired yet with Mark. I mean, regardless of if you're pro or amateur, I think that shows a fantastic opportunity because, right, if you're an amateur, you have the opportunity to turn pro in multiple organizations within one show. And, I mean, that's fantastic. Or you're competing with some of the best in the world, or at least in the US for now, on the pro side. So yeah, win-win either way.
That, and as an amateur, you get to enjoy like a premier level experience for bodybuilding in general. Like, I mean, small shows have their value. It's great. It's a good like dip your feet in the water, but being able to step in and feel like an athlete, treated like a high level athlete, like it wasn't too far from how I felt competing at the Arnold.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it's very, very similar. I didn't compete in bodybuilding, so it's important to remember that the bodybuilders have a totally different experience at the Arnold than the strongmen, but the production value is huge. I would have loved to do that as an amateur too. So
yeah, and
Absolutely.
that's why I've been, highly praising the Mr. America ever since I did it last year. I saw what Mark's been doing with it, the amount of money he puts into it and the effort he puts into it, and why the 3 of us were very interested in getting involved directly through the live commentary. So, I was very impressed with that weekend too. So, and everything I've heard from athletes is quite similar. It's a little bit of a different from the athletes because you do the whole check-in process and you're the tanning and the backstage area and all that stuff. But I've heard similar feedback from others about just being treated, like an athlete, which is how it should be. So I'm the 3 of us are very much on board with that initiative and that.
Yeah, it meant a lot. as an athlete to kind of feel like one. So it was really cool.
Yeah. And I saw today, right? So you kind of hinted at some of your ultimate goal, right? So you competed at, well, I'll let you say it, right? So Arnold, that was kind of step one in that process, right?
Yeah. So step one, like my overarching goal earlier this year, after I realized I was going to the Arnold, was to move back to bodybuilding after the Arnold. And what I wanted to do was to set up my season in a way that I could potentially compete in two world championships in two somewhat dissimilar sports in the same calendar year.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone, I don't know many people who've been able to do that. And I thought it would be absolutely wild to give that a shot. And not a lot of people know who I am, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of just like, if possible, to just kind of show up. Like, who the hell is that sweeper? So
Yeah. Well, you accomplished step one, right? You compete at the
yeah.
Arnold's. So I would assume then, right? You won your WNBF pro card, right? So this year, do you have to qualify, or is that just remind me of that for this year? Because I know they've
Yes.
changed it in the past.
Yeah. So step one, compete in the Arnold. Step two, INBF show, win the pro card, which had to happen at that first show. Because I then had to compete one time as a pro in WNBF at a show. The next of which for me was only going to be possible this upcoming November 5th. Up in a little bit west of Boston, the Boxborough one, that
the Monster Mash.
Monster
Yeah,
Mash.
I did that show last year.
Yeah, so I'll be up there competing in that one, and I just need to be there. I'm hoping to do as well as I possibly can. Hopefully, there's a bunch of people there, but we'll see how that one goes.
It was a small pro turnout last year, so hopefully it's a little bigger.
That. Yeah. The email says a lot of people are traveling, so hopefully it's.
Fortunately, with the amateur show on the Saturday and then the pro show on the Sunday, the amateur 1 to however many it is, depending on the turnout, that win the pro card are able to compete on the Sunday. So that increases the count. But
yeah, because I think Chris did that last year, competed again.
Competed the next day. Yeah, because I watched both, and I think there was only one. Actually, last year there was only one pro that showed up that was not a winner from the day before. But if you're going, that means it's at least the same number as last year. So
I've heard of other people intending to go to that show as well, though. So I think hopefully you should have a handful at least up there. And I have the feeling that shows are starting to get back to the way they were pre-pandemic. It just seems like a little bit better turnout with a lot of things, and obviously a little bit biased, right? Because Mr. A had a huge turnout, but that was a premier show. But I would just only hope that with that quality of competitor competing this year, that this might be like one of the up years, if you will, right? Because we all know that there's some years that it just doesn't seem like anybody's really competing.
Yeah, I'm hoping so as well. But yeah, so the next one will be that Monster Mash. I might try to sneak in an OCB show on the 22nd. See if I can get my wife on board with me competing another 3 weeks in a row. And for it to make sense financially, just because it's a close show. It's in Fayetteville, which is 2 hours south of me in North Carolina. And now that OCB has lifted that you can't compete with other feds or whatever. Yeah, I'm actually interested in trying that out. It wasn't on my schedule originally because of that, and then I'm trying to sneak that in, and then Worlds after that. So that would be the 19th.
There you go.
Which I'm ready to go to. So I'm super stoked for that.
Yeah, that'll be another one, right? It's an opportunity, it's an experience, right? Regardless of how you place, you can say you competed in a world championship and you saw in person some of the best of the best.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I'm excited about is being on stage with a number of other bantamweights. That would be nice.
Yeah, because that's always
Yeah, I was gonna say being next to Meshack is awesome, but no one wants to stand next to Meshack.
Yeah. To truly compare yourself against other people that are comparable to you, right? I mean, that was one of the things I actually said in the live stream, right? Like some of the athletes in the Mr. America could have been a little bit more competitive had there been weight classes, right? Versus the way that things were split. Had there been at least lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight, or something like that,
Yeah, and
I think things would have
conceptually,
seemed different.
I do like the concept of height classes. So like people have an opportunity to get as big as they want without
Mhm.
having to make weight cuts. God knows I've made plenty of water cuts for strongman.
Mhm.
So I like the option of both. I'm just going to be far more competitive in a weight class restricted version than a
Yeah.
height class restricted one, at least for in the number of decades I can imagine that I'll be competing in.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. So what's your height?
I'm 5'7".
Okay. Yeah. So I got a couple inches on you. I am notoriously a lighter framed individual, but I'm like 5'10". So I always get put in the like tall class next to dudes that are like 40, 50 pounds heavier than me. Just like, great, here we go again.
Brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. But
Yep.
yeah, so we will certainly be following that journey, right? So Monster Mash first, then Worlds. That'll be good. Dan, any points you want to bring up on the training history or anything like that, or anything you thought interesting?
Yeah, so I guess to kind of close this out, I'm curious what your thoughts are after the season. Have you thought that far ahead? Have you thought, what you're gonna do after the show, reversing, obviously, or I assume putting some weight back on your frame and competing in strongman again next year, or what's kind of your thought process with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've roughly mapped out the next 2 years. After the 19th, I plan to get back up to about, so I'm at 135 right now. I want to get back to 155 relatively quickly. I'll probably try to gain at a rate of 1.5 pounds per week until I hit that. And at that point, I'll probably sit at maintenance or a minor surplus and gain up for the next roughly year. And that year, I'm just going to compete at a local level in strongman and try to volunteer at the higher level shows, like judging and whatnot. But yeah, I'm going to compete in strongman again in my off season with a higher focus in improving my physique and spending a lot more time trying to build muscle. Most of my training in the last 8 to 12 years has been primarily strength focused. Obviously, I'm still building some muscle tissue, but I want to spend more time trying to focus on, you know, the things that will be more focused on building muscle rather than just kind of strength. So the rep ranges will probably change. Some of my periodization will change. But yeah, it'll be more focused on that while doing some local level strongman. And then for 2020 or the year after that, so 2023 to 2024, more gaining until I reach back out and then join bodybuilding again for competing in 2024, probably for a nearly identical season.
All right. Maybe I'll bump into you. That's the target, 2024. So
Hell yeah, I
I
love that.
I possibly
absolutely.
could too. We'll see.
There we go. Yeah, we told Mark we're gonna have to hire some interns for that year because we all want to be on that stage now.
Yeah, it'll be
So
fun.
yeah, awesome, awesome. Well, I think it's hilarious, right? Like you seem to be very much like Dan, very analytical with everything, right? Like I'm gonna gain 1.5 pounds for this amount of weeks, do this, do that. Versus a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna gain some weight and I'm gonna train, and like it feels like you have a very logical and laid out plan going forward. So that's
Oh man, you should
or
see my spreadsheets.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
you guys
they
seem to be
map it
very
out with
close.
tons of like if then formulas and indexing. It's glorious.
Oh geez. I feel like I'm getting anxiety thinking about that. Myself, I'm just much more like I'll write it down on a napkin or like a random piece of paper
Yeah,
and like let's go do it.
yeah, for sure. Like I'm analytical, but my approach to this entire prep has been chill vibes.
Mhm.
So like basically, I mean, I'm a pretty low stress person, but I am very habitual. One of the
Mhm.
things that's been important for me is um, setting myself up in a way that if my habits are disrupted, I'm not stressed out about it because I have backups or something
Mhm.
else to
Yeah.
fall back on.
Mhm.
Just because, like Dan, I'm very very habitual, or I just all the meals at the same time, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I
You
don't
can
want to
call him
stress
a
out too
robot.
much.
We all do.
I know, yeah. I'm pretty similar in that, but um, yeah, chill vibes has been important and just not over
Mhm.
stressing. So
Keeping that
Yeah.
stress
So
down definitely is of benefit in bodybuilding into the
yeah,
physique and progression and dieting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's give an example of that real quick if we have the time, right? So how, right, something gets messed up, whether it's scheduling, training, whatever. Give an example of how you kind of set up that system so people maybe can learn from that.
Yeah, sure. One of my main things that I do most days is probably the 30 minutes before I go to bed, I prepare for the next day. And sometimes I'm out, like I'm entirely out because like movie night with my wife, and or something is unplanned and I can't get back until like it is straight up my bedtime, which is very
Mhm.
hard at 9:30. I have pre-saved stuff in the background that like if I don't have time or if I am too stressed, I know that I have a couple easy meals that I know I can always go to. Some like quick breakfast and some like really easy scheduling stuff that I can
Mhm.
throw in as a just like a whoop, I need something. I roll those dice out, and I have a plan for the next day because it's a flexible structure that I have that I can just fill in the next day, kind of auto populate it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, normally I like to be way more detailed, but I have those backups.
Yeah, good. No, I mean, that makes sense. And that's something I think we can all probably, you know, have used in the past to a degree, right? Dan, we talk about obviously a little bit more structure than me and Leroy, but even with me and Leroy, we have our main like foundational meals, right? Like we take a more
Hmm.
flexible approach, but at any given time, I know that, X amount of chicken, broccoli, and rice is X amount of carbs, protein, fat, and like I can plug that in at any part of my day, or, you have those staples that everything hits the fan, you still know what you can go to.
Yeah, I plan variety and have backups of those meals
Yeah,
essentially.
and Peter, when I travel, that I apply very similar methodology. Like I have protein bars at hand or snack, jerky on hand or that sort of thing. So
Yeah, all
bars
the
and yeah.
all the protein powders and stuff that they give in goodie bags.
Oh, the little sample packs, yeah, they're
I
clutch.
save for travel.
Those are clutch for travel. They are.
Hmm.
They are.
Yeah. You should see Dan's like giant tote that he brings with him when he travels. It's impressive. He's got everything. The man
Yeah, a
doesn't
lot of
miss.
it just stays in my house, like half put together. That way, I don't need to unpack it. When next travel, I'll just, you know. But
That's
anyways,
perfect.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
So
Well, yeah. So we appreciate your time coming on tonight. For
Yeah,
those that don't follow you, let's shout out, things that you're working on, where they can find you, where they can ask you questions and kind of follow along your journey.
sounds good. Surge of strength, surge underscore strength. That's my Instagram. That's where I basically just post me working out in my shed, as well as my contest photos and strongman stuff. I also am a co-founder of Applied Strongman, which is a evidence-based strongman website. We basically post guides. There's not a lot of that for strongman. There's a lot of it for bodybuilding and for powerlifting, but not really for strongman. So we provide basically all of that for free. There is some coaching, so I do some strength coaching on the side as well. So yeah, that's appliedstrongman.net. And that's really it. Basically just Instagram and that site. That's kind of all I run.
Perfect. Perfect.
very
Yeah.
cool.
All right. Well, like I said, thank you for coming on. We'll be following the journey. I think these are the type of episodes that we love to do, right? A little bit of a unique twist on things. You've got a unique background and certainly a unique approach to your off seasons, right? Like strongman is no joke. So we appreciate your time. And for those of you that are still listening, we appreciate you guys as well. If you're not already, like, subscribe, follow, and we will catch you in the next one.